My heart was absolutely hammering against my ribs. I mean, truly pounding. I could feel the cold metal of the ring box in my jacket pocket, a constant, weighty reminder as I watched my family, my mom, Brenda, my dad, my siblings Sarah and Josh, Aunt Carol, Uncle Bob, all laughing and chatting around the dining table. It was Christmas Eve, and we were at my parents' house in Beaverton, Oregon, just like every year. Everyone was full and happy after Brenda's epic prime rib dinner. This was it. This was my moment. I pushed back my chair, stood up, and I swear the whole room went silent, even though it didn't. My hands were shaking, badly, as I pulled out the small, velvet box. I took a deep breath, dropped to one knee right there, on the plush carpet, and looked up at Serafina. She was sitting across from me, her eyes wide, a beautiful smile already spreading across her face. My mom had her hands clapped over her mouth, tears already welling up. Everyone was beaming, their expressions a mix of surprise and pure delight. I started talking, telling Serafina how much I loved her, how I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her, how she made me happier than I'd ever been. My voice, I'm sure, was a little choked up, but I meant every single word. I opened the ring box and held it up to her, this white gold ring with a sparkling 1-carat diamond I'd worked myself to the bone to buy. And that's when it happened. The smile, that beautiful smile, just vanished. It was like someone had flipped a switch. She stared at the ring for what felt like an eternity, her expression slowly twisting from surprise to something I couldn't quite place. Then, she looked at me, still kneeling there, with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Are you serious right now?" she asked, her voice sharp, cutting through the festive air. The room went dead silent this time, a tangible hush. No one knew what was going on. My mom's hands dropped from her mouth. Serafina looked down at the ring again, and I swear, she actually wrinkled her nose like she'd smelled something rotten. And then she said it. The words that will probably echo in my mind for the rest of my life: "This ring is small and pathetic, just like you." A collective gasp went through the room. Brenda let out a small sob. Sarah's jaw was practically on the floor. My dad half stood, his face already turning red. But Serafina wasn't done. Oh no. She leaned forward, venom in her voice. She told me her friend Chloe got engaged 2 months ago, and her ring was 3 carats. She said Chloe's boyfriend had class, had taste, and that I was clearly cheap and didn't value her. She couldn't believe I'd embarrass her like this, in front of everyone, with such a tiny, sad little ring. I was still on one knee, frozen. My brain just couldn't process what was happening. This woman, the one I'd loved, lived with, and supported for 3 years, was systematically tearing me apart in front of my entire family on Christmas. You see, I met Serafina 3 years ago at a friend's birthday party in Portland, Oregon. I thought she was absolutely stunning, smart, funny, everything I'd ever looked for. We clicked instantly. Within 6 months, she was practically living at my apartment downtown. 8 months in, she officially moved in. And looking back now, that's where the red flags started waving, but love, you know, love makes you incredibly stupid. I'm a software engineer. I make decent money, enough to comfortably live in Portland. I owned my 2-bedroom apartment outright before I met her, and my car was paid off. Serafina worked part-time at a boutique in the Pearl District, barely making $1,800 a month if she was lucky. From the moment she moved in, she contributed exactly nothing financially. 0 rent, 0 utilities, 0 groceries. At first, I tried to be understanding. I thought we were building something, that once she got more stable, we'd balance things out. But whenever I gently brought up the idea of her contributing, even just a couple $100 for groceries or electricity, she'd flip it. She'd accuse me of trying to control her, of making her feel small, of being obsessed with money. A real man wouldn't keep score, she'd say, always making me feel like the bad guy for simply suggesting we share the load. So, I kept paying for everything. Mortgage, electric, internet, groceries, even gas for both our cars because somehow I ended up paying her car insurance, too. My savings were draining, but I kept telling myself it was temporary. She loved me. We were partners. 5 months before that Christmas Eve, I started seriously thinking about proposing. Despite the financial mess, I genuinely loved her. I thought marriage would solidify things, give her the security to step up. I started ring shopping, wanting something beautiful. I saved for 2 solid months, skipping lunches, canceling my gym membership, not going out with friends. I lived like a broke college student just to afford something special. That $8,200 ring was my sacrifice, my commitment. And now, here I was, kneeling, with her looking at me like I was something she'd stepped in. Then she did something I still can't quite believe happened. She leaned forward, eyes blazing, and she spat in my face. Actual spit. Right there, in front of my Brenda, my dad, my siblings, everyone. Brenda screamed. My dad was on his feet, yelling at her to get out. Josh moved towards us, but I held up a hand to stop him. I slowly stood, pulled up my pocket square, and wiped my face. I looked her dead in the eye, my voice unnervingly calm. We're done. Get out of my house, and out of my life. She actually laughed. A cold, dismissive laugh, like this was all a big joke. Fine, she sneered. I've been meaning to tell you anyway. And right there, in front of my shattered family, she told me she'd been seeing her ex-boyfriend, Adrian, for the past 4 months. She said he was more of a man than I'd ever be, that he knew how to treat a woman, that he didn't nickel and dime her like I did. She called me boring, cheap, controlling, and admitted she'd only stayed with me because I was a free place to live. Every word was a knife, and she delivered each one with a sickening smile. She grabbed her coat and purse, looked at Brenda, and in a sickly sweet voice, said, "Thanks for dinner." Then she walked out. The second the door closed, Brenda rushed to me, pulling me into a tight hug. Sarah was crying. My dad was purple with rage. I just stood there, clutching that $8,200 ring, which now felt like the biggest, stupidest mistake I'd ever made. I drove home to my apartment alone that night, numb with shock. It was cold, maybe 20 degrees, and snow was starting to fall in Portland. All of her stuff was still there, her clothes in the closet, toiletries in the bathroom, shoes by the door. I spent the entire night, from late Christmas Eve into Christmas morning, packing. Every single item she owned went into black garbage bags and boxes. 3 years of her life, condensed into trash bags. I didn't sleep a wink. By 6 a.m. on Christmas morning, everything was packed. I dragged every bag and box down to the parking lot and piled it in a snowdrift next to the guest spots. It was freezing. I took photos of everything for evidence, then texted her that her stuff was outside and she had until noon to pick it up before I donated it all. Then I went back inside and changed the locks on my apartment door. New locks by 10 a.m. cost me $200 for the emergency holiday service, but it was worth every single penny. Around 11:30 a.m., I heard a car pull up. I looked out my window and saw Serafina getting out of the passenger side of a sleek black car. And who was driving? Adrian, her ex-boyfriend. The guy she'd been cheating on me with. He got out too, and they both surveyed the pile of her belongings sitting in the snow. This is where everything truly started to spiral out of control, and where I realized just how much worse this nightmare was about to get. I stayed at my window, watching. I wasn't about to go down there and give them any satisfaction. Adrian was exactly what I expected: tall, gym bro build, expensive leather jacket, designer jeans. The kind of guy who thinks money and muscles make him invincible. He was walking around Serafina's stuff, kicking at boxes, shaking his head like it was all beneath him. Serafina was frantically trying to figure out what to grab first, tearing through bags, tossing things around, making an even bigger mess. I could see her getting agitated, pointing up at my window and gesturing wildly. Then Adrian started walking toward my building entrance. I knew this was about to get ugly. I went down to the lobby. If I didn't, he'd buzz my apartment or cause a scene in the hallway. When I opened the lobby door, Adrian was standing there, a smug grin on his face, hands in his pockets like he owned the place. He looked me up and down, sizing me up. He told me Serafina needed help, and that I should be a man and help her out. I just stared at him. Her stuff is in the parking lot. She can take what she wants. You both need to leave. He didn't like that answer. He took a step closer, getting right in my space. Maybe you don't understand the situation, he said, and I could smell his cologne, way too much of it. Serafina's with me now. She upgraded. You need to show some respect. I stepped to the side and told him again to just take the stuff and go. That's when he made his move. He shoved my shoulder hard, trying to push me back. I stumbled, but caught myself. Before I could even think, my high school wrestling training kicked in. When he came at me again, I grabbed his wrist and used his momentum against him, stepping to the side and pulling him forward. Here's the thing about parking lots in a Portland winter, they're slippery as hell. Adrian's expensive dress shoes had zero traction. When I redirected his lunge, his feet went up from under him, and he went down hard, right into a snowbank that the plows had piled up next to the entrance. He landed on his back and side, his leather jacket packed with snow, yelling. He wasn't done. He got up, furious, and charged at me again, swinging wildly. I ducked under his punch, and he slipped again on the ice, this time going face first into the snow. Serafina came running over, shrieking at me like I'd attacked him, calling me every name in the book, threatening to call the police. I just held up my hands. He came at me first. I was defending myself. You both need to leave my property, now. Adrian got up, covered in snow and slush, his expensive jacket ruined, his pride even more damaged. He was red-faced and breathing hard, but I could tell he wasn't going to try anything else. He knew he'd embarrassed himself. They both started loading her stuff into his car, throwing bags and boxes into the trunk and backseat. Serafina kept yelling at me the whole time, saying I was pathetic, that I'd regret this, that Adrian was 10 times the man I'd ever be. I just stood there silently until they loaded what they could fit and drove off, leaving probably a third of her stuff still in the parking lot. I thought that was the end of it, but I was so wrong. About 3 hours later, I heard another car pull up. It was Serafina again, this time alone. She got out and just stood there, staring at the remaining pile of her belongings. Then something in her snapped. She started grabbing her stuff and throwing it everywhere. Clothes flew through the air. Shoes were hurled at the building. She grabbed a box of kitchen stuff and dumped it all over the parking lot. She was shrieking incoherently, just this primal sound of rage. She picked up what looked like a framed photo of us together and hurled it at my building. It smashed against the brick wall below my window, glass shattering everywhere. Other tenants started coming out onto their balconies. Someone yelled at her to calm down. This went on for maybe 10 minutes. Her just destroying everything, working herself into a complete frenzy. Then she grabbed a decorative vase, something heavy and ceramic, wound up like a baseball pitcher, and threw it directly at my window. It didn't reach the 3rd floor, smashing on the ground below, but the intent was clear. That's when I called the police. I told them my ex-girlfriend was destroying property in my apartment parking lot and had thrown objects at my building. They said they'd send someone right away. Serafina must have heard the sirens because she suddenly stopped her rampage, standing there breathing heavily, surrounded by the disaster she'd created. 2 police officers pulled up. They approached her calmly, asking her name and what was going on. She immediately went into full victim mode, telling them I'd thrown her out, kept all her stuff, that I was abusive and controlling. The officers asked for my side, and I came down with my phone, showing them the text from earlier, the photos I'd taken of her stuff neatly piled up before she arrived, the timestamps. I showed them the changed locks receipt, explained about the Christmas incident. One officer was taking notes while the other tried to calm Serafina down because she was getting increasingly worked up, interrupting and yelling over everyone. The officer asked her to calm down multiple times. Then she made the biggest mistake possible. When one of the officers stepped closer to try to get her to stop yelling, she shoved him. Not hard, but any physical contact with a police officer is a terrible idea. Both officers immediately changed their demeanor. They told her she was under arrest for disorderly conduct and resisting an officer. She completely lost it, shrieking that they couldn't arrest her, that she was the victim, that this was all my fault. They cuffed her and walked her to the patrol car while she thrashed and yelled the entire way. The officers told me I should file for a restraining order, given her behavior and the destruction of property. They took photos of the scene, got witness statements from neighbors, and gave me a case number. Then they drove off with Serafina, still yelling in the backseat. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet, honestly. I filed for a restraining order and got a temporary one approved immediately based on the police report and witness statements. I had to go to court for the permanent order hearing, but Serafina didn't even show up. So, the judge granted it by default, 5 years with no contact allowed. I thought I was finally free. Then, about a week after Serafina's arrest, I got an email at work from an address I didn't recognize. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. It was Adrian. The email was full of threats, telling me I'd ruined his relationship, that Serafina was struggling because of me, that I needed to drop the restraining order and apologize. He said if I didn't make things right, he'd make sure I regretted it. He went into detail, knowing where I worked, lived, and where my parents in Beaverton lived. It was clearly threatening and, honestly, terrifying. I immediately forwarded the email to HR and explained everything. Our company takes threats against employees seriously, especially threats of violence. HR contacted their legal team and asked if I wanted to file a police report, which I did. But here's where things took an interesting turn. HR's legal team did some digging and found out Adrian worked for a company that had a business relationship with ours. They reached out to his employer, shared the threatening emails, explaining that one of their employees was making violent threats against our staff. Adrian's company apparently had a zero-tolerance policy. Within 48 hours, I got a call from the detective handling my case. He informed me that Adrian's employer had terminated him immediately, and his company was cooperating fully with the investigation. 2 days after that, my phone rang from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered it. It was Adrian, and he sounded completely different, desperate, panicked. He was practically crying, begging me not to press charges, saying he'd lost his job and couldn't afford a lawyer. He said Serafina had been playing him the entire time, that she told him I was abusive and controlling, that she played the victim so convincingly, he believed every word. He said once she moved in with him after leaving me, he realized she was completely unstable. She'd go through his phone constantly, accuse him of cheating, throw screaming fits over nothing. He said she'd maxed out a credit card he'd stupidly given her within 2 weeks, buying designer clothes and expensive dinners with her friends while contributing nothing to rent or bills. He said she was doing the exact same thing to him that she'd done to me, and he finally understood why I'd ended it. He apologized over and over, said he'd been an idiot, that he'd do anything to make this right. I told him I'd think about the charges, but that he needed to stay far away from me and never contact me again. He agreed immediately and hung up. I never heard from him again. Months passed, and life started feeling normal again. I went to therapy to process everything. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my relationship with Serafina. I started going to the gym again, actually enjoying my life. My family was incredibly supportive through everything. Brenda called me every few days just to check in. About 6 weeks after all the chaos, I adopted a dog from the local animal shelter, a golden retriever mix I named Buddy. Having him around helped more than I can explain. Coming home to something that was just happy to see me, with no drama or manipulation. I even started dating again. Met a woman named Olivia through a friend at work. We'd been seeing each other for about 6 weeks, and things were going really well. Nothing rushed, just healthy and normal. Then, on a random Tuesday evening in mid-March, I heard a knock at my door. When I looked through the peephole, my heart sank. It was Serafina. She was standing there holding a plate covered in plastic wrap. And she was smiling like nothing had ever happened. I stood there frozen, staring through the peephole at Serafina, holding that plate of cookies with the most unsettling smile on her face. She was dressed nicely, hair done, makeup perfect, like she was going on a first date. She knocked again, softer this time, almost gentle. My heart was racing because she was violating the restraining order just by being there, and I knew this could go very wrong, very quickly. I pulled up my phone and immediately started recording video through the peephole. I wanted documentation of everything. Buddy was at my side, a low growl rumbling in his chest because he could sense something was wrong. She knocked a third time and called out in the sickeningly sweet voice that she just wanted to talk, that she'd made me cookies as an apology, that she missed me and wanted to make things right. I didn't open the door. Instead, I called out through it that she needed to leave immediately because she was violating a court order. Her smile faltered for just a second when she realized I wasn't going to open the door. She said she knew about the restraining order, but she thought if I saw how sorry she was, I'd give her another chance. She said the past few months had been hell for her, that she'd realized what a huge mistake she'd made, that Adrian had kicked her out, and I was the love of her life. She was laying in on thick, using that manipulative tone I'd heard so many times before when she wanted something. I told her again to leave or I'd call the police. And that's when I heard another voice from inside my apartment. It was Olivia, asking if everything was okay. The second Serafina heard another woman's voice through the door, everything changed. The sweet mask dropped instantly, and her face contorted into pure rage. She started shrieking, demanding to know who was in there, calling me every vile name she could think of. She was pounding on the door now, the plate of cookies still in one hand. She yelled that I'd moved on already, that I was a liar and a cheat, that she knew I'd probably been seeing someone the whole time we were together. The irony was absolutely insane, considering she'd been cheating on me for months. I told Olivia to stay back and call 911. Then I positioned myself at the door, ready to block it if Serafina tried to force her way in. Buddy was barking now, protective and alert. Serafina was completely unhinged, kicking at the door, still shrieking. Then I heard the plastic wrap ripping, and I looked through the peephole to see her grabbing cookies off the plate. These weren't normal cookies. They looked rock hard, almost like hockey pucks. She started throwing them at my door. These hard projectiles just smashing against the wood and the frame. Some shattered on impact, others bounced off and left dents in the drywall of the hallway. My neighbor across the hall opened his door to see what all the commotion was about, and a cookie flew past his head and slammed into his doorframe. He yelled at Serafina to stop, and she turned on him, shrieking that this was none of his business. He quickly shut his door, and I heard him yelling that he was calling the cops, too. Serafina was in a full meltdown now, throwing cookies at my door, at the walls, at the ceiling. She was crying and yelling simultaneously, this guttural sound of pure rage and desperation. She kept yelling that I'd ruined her life, that she'd given me everything, that I was supposed to wait for her. I could hear sirens in the distance getting closer, and so could Serafina. Instead of running or trying to leave, she just kept throwing cookies and shrieking. When the police arrived, 2 officers came up the stairs and found Serafina in the hallway, surrounded by broken cookies and destruction. She had tears and mascara running down her face. Her hair was a mess from how she'd been pulling at it, and she was still holding one cookie in her hand, ready to throw. The officers immediately recognized the situation. They asked her name, and when she told them, one of the officers said he remembered her from the incident 4 months ago. They asked her if she knew she had a restraining order, and she actually said yes, but that she needed to talk to me. One of the officers picked up an intact cookie from the ground and actually laughed, making a comment about how it was hard as a rock and asking if she was trying to use baked goods as weapons. Serafina started arguing with them, saying they didn't understand, that I was the problem, that she was the victim here. They asked her calmly to come with them, and she refused. She said she wasn't leaving until she talked to me, that I owed her that much. The officers explained that she was under arrest for violating the restraining order and for disorderly conduct. That's when she tried to pull away. She jerked her arm back when one officer reached for her and started backing down the hallway. The officers weren't rough, but they were firm. They told her multiple times to stop resisting and to put her hands behind her back. She was still arguing, still trying to justify why she should be allowed to be there. They eventually got her in handcuffs while she was crying and yelling, walked her down to the patrol car while she protested the entire way. My neighbor came out after they'd left, and we surveyed the damage together. There were cookie pieces and crumbs everywhere, dents in the walls, scuff marks on my door from where she'd been kicking it. Olivia was pretty shaken up inside. She'd never experienced anything like that before. I explained the entire history while we cleaned up the cookies from the hallway, showed her the restraining order paperwork, the police reports from before. She was incredibly understanding, but I could tell she was processing just how crazy the situation was. We spent the rest of the evening just talking, and honestly, it made us closer because she saw me handle a genuinely insane situation calmly and by the book. Buddy stayed close to both of us the whole night, like he knew we needed the comfort. The legal aftermath took a few months to fully resolve. Serafina was charged with violating the restraining order, disorderly conduct, and they even added destruction of property for the damage to the hallway. She tried to fight the charges, claimed she was having a mental health crisis and shouldn't be held responsible. The judge wasn't having it, especially given her history and the fact that this was her second arrest related to me. She ended up getting 45 days in jail, 18 months probation after that, and she was ordered to pay restitution to both me and my landlord for the repairs to the hallway. The restraining order was extended for another 5 years from that date. I never heard from Serafina again after that. Last I heard through mutual friends, she'd moved to Arizona and was working some retail job. Adrian apparently got a new job eventually, but from what I understand, his career never really recovered from getting fired over those threatening emails. As for me, Olivia and I are still together over a year later now. Things are healthy, normal, and drama-free. My family absolutely loves her. Brenda especially has said multiple times how relieved she is that I found someone stable. We actually spent last Christmas at my parents' house in Beaverton, the same place where everything went down the year before, but this time it was perfect. Brenda made the same prime rib dinner. And when we were all sitting around the table after dessert, my dad raised his glass and made a toast about how grateful he was that I'd found someone who truly appreciated me. Olivia squeezed my hand under the table, and I realized just how different my life had become in 1 year. I still have that $8,200 ring sitting in a safe. I've thought about selling it, but part of me wants to hold on to it as a reminder of what I survived and what I learned. The whole experience taught me to trust my instincts about red flags, to value myself enough to not accept financial manipulation, and that sometimes the trash really does take itself out. Life is genuinely good now, and I'm grateful every single day that Serafina showed her true colors before I actually married her. Because if she'd waited until after the wedding to reveal who she really was, I'd probably still be dealing with her in divorce court. Sometimes the worst moments of your life end up being the biggest blessings in disguise, and getting spat on during a Christmas proposal definitely qualifies. Buddy is curled up at my feet right now as I write this. Olivia is in the kitchen making dinner, and I can honestly say I've never been happier. That's the real revenge, I guess. Just living well. What do you think? Was I too harsh, or did I handle it exactly right?